So this morning we're going to be in Ruth chapter 3 as we continue looking at this account of Ruth in the Bible. You know, there are many things that stand out as we go through this book, but above all, really what stands out is the character that Ruth has. The Bible reveals several times that a woman of good character is very important and very precious. In Proverbs 31:10, it says that, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies." And this virtuous woman, this woman of good character, is what we're seeing as we go through this book of Ruth. And we've seen her loyalty. We've seen her work ethic, and today we're going to look and see how she was a humble woman. And we're going to see that this humility, which is not to be confused with humiliation, is one of the key things that God is looking for in people. This is one of the characteristics that God wants to build into people. And we're going to see how she demonstrates this as we go through chapter 3 of Ruth's story. So in chapter 3, starting in verse 1, says, "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, 'My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do.' She said to her, 'All that you say I will do.' So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. It happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. He said, 'Who are you?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative.' Then he said, 'May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first, by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. Now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning.' So she lay at his feet until morning, and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, 'Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor.' Again he said, 'Give me the cloak that is on you, and hold it.' And so she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, 'How did it go, my daughter?' And she told her all that the man had done for her. She said, 'These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, "Do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed." Then she said, 'Wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today.'" You know, we spent this past week, most of it visiting with family, going to a graduation down in New Mexico. And on our way home, I mentioned to Melissa that one of the things that I admire about my dad is his humble nature. We were talking about different people and different ways people act and behave, and particularly when they know something. And some people know things, and they know that they know them, and they get this arrogance about them and it's hard for me to deal with, because you can't really say much because they're right in their facts, but you still want to punch them in the nose. It just it gets to me. But then there are people like my dad. He knows a lot. As a matter of fact, he knows a lot more than he will tell you he knows. But he's very humble. And when he's talking with somebody else who has a different opinion, I'm always amazed at how he'll listen to them. And sometimes he'll even make them feel good about what they think they know. If it's one of those matters that it's a matter of opinion, if you have a different opinion than him, yeah, oh well. He can roll with it. And it just amazes me, and it really amazes me. I don't think a lot of people know how much my dad knows. I mean, there's so much in his mind. Not from schooling or anything. He tried college for a short time, discovered that wasn't his cup of tea. But it's just life. He's been a student throughout his life. He continues to learn stuff, and it amazes me how humble he is with all of this. Now, some people see humility as a weakness, and sometimes it's because they confuse humility, which the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines as being free from arrogance or pride. They confuse that with humiliation, which means to lower someone through embarrassment or shame. And humiliation is not a good thing. Nowhere does God tell us we need to be people who let others humiliate us, although there are times that might be appropriate. That might be the right thing to do from time to time, but that's not a general rule. That's not one of those things God says you will be people of humiliation. He says you will be people of humility. In Zephaniah 2:3, for example, God says through the prophet, "Seek the Lord, all you humble of the earth, who have carried out his ordinances. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger." And so with this in mind, and this call from the prophet Zephaniah to seek righteousness and seek humility, we begin to see that we need to recognize the power of a humble person. And when we look at Ruth, we kind of see how this plays out. And we see that there really is power in humility. And when we look at her, here's some of the things we see. First of all, we see that humble people listen to wise advice. The chapter starts out with Naomi giving advice to Ruth. And Naomi knows that Ruth has this job of going gathering after the harvesters, but she understands harvest only lasts so long. We've got to make arrangements for beyond that. And Naomi's concern is not Naomi. Her concern is Ruth. Okay, Ruth is a younger woman, and she's got her life ahead of her. And Naomi wants to make sure that it's great that you've got this temporary job, but we got to find something. We got to get something a little more secure for you. And so she gives instructions to her to go, and some of her instructions are kind of unusual to us today. She wants her to go and wait until Boaz falls asleep. And during harvest time, it was common for them to sleep out on the harvest field. And we see that. He goes to the end of the grain and lies down, takes a nap, and Naomi essentially says, wait for that time to come and then uncover his feet and lie there. See, now I'd be concerned about that probably because of the way I sleep. I kick a little bit, I roll around, I'm not still. I'm sure that's part of how I maintain my fitness is I exercise in my sleep. It's a great way to work out, you know what I'm saying? But a lot of it we're not sure of, but the scholars believe that this would be a common thing in Ruth's day to do is if you want to let somebody know that you want to marry them, you uncover their feet and lie down, essentially, and then you invite them to, as she did, spread the corner of their blanket over you as an indicator that they are willing to take you in and protect you, and so they spread their covering over you saying, I accept you. Strange thing, I'm kind of glad that's not a thing today, but it was the thing, apparently, in their day. Now, Naomi explains to Ruth what she's supposed to do, probably because Ruth was a Moabitess, wasn't from the area. They probably didn't do this. And so Naomi tells her, here's what you need to do. In essence, here's how you let Boaz know that you'd be willing to marry him. And so what Ruth does, being a humble person, is in verse 5, she says, all that you say, I will do. See, humble people listen. Arrogant people don't. Prideful people don't. They refuse to listen. Kind of like in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, the Klingon captain refuses to listen. As a matter of fact, there's one time where Kirk wants him to beam Spock's body up, get it off the planet, because the planet's falling apart. It's about to go supernova. And he's like, get Spock out of here. And the Klingon commander, no. And Kirk goes, why? And the Klingon goes, because you wish it. Because you wish. And frankly, I've met people like that. They will refuse to do something simply because somebody wants it. Or because it wasn't their idea. If it's not my idea, it can't be any good. They don't listen. And you know, this is called pride. And it's the exact opposite of humility. Pride and arrogance often lead people to ignore what others think and what others say and simply do whatever they think is best. And the problem is that there is always someone out there who knows better. There is always someone who knows something that you don't, and by ignoring them, the prideful person really ends up limiting themselves. You can get hurt that way too, but by and large you end up limiting yourself because you're confined to only what you know or what you think you know. And if you think you know better than everyone else and are never willing to learn and grow, then you will find that in the end you've really limited how far you can go in life, and you've limited your options, and you've limited becoming better. And so learning to heed good advice is a key ingredient to successful living. So don't be so arrogant that you think you know better than everyone else, or that those who have different ideas than you are somehow inferior or not knowledgeable. You just might find out that there are some wise people out there with great advice that'll help you out if you're willing to listen. Willing to learn, willing to grow. And for Ruth, she listened. She was a humble person, and when her mother-in-law gave her advice, she said, I'll do it. They're willing to listen. Humble people also ask for help. See, this was Naomi's advice to Ruth. Ruth did it, and the advice was essentially go and ask Boaz if he's willing to help. Because this whole thing is about essentially a marriage proposal. And the whole reason for the marriage wasn't that, the romantic feelings and butterflies in the air and all this stuff. The whole purpose was Naomi was going to need help securing herself in the future. Particularly in her day and time, there were no government programs to help widows and single ladies, and it really would be really hard in their day for a woman and her mother-in-law to make much headway in life. They wouldn't get ahead. They'd essentially be reduced to these little jobs like Ruth had, following harvesters, collecting what they could, and then trying to find little ways to survive. But if they were going to do more than survive in life, and they were going to thrive in life, they were going to need some help. And so Ruth was willing to go and ask Boaz for help. Now, it takes great strength of character to be humble enough to ask for help. You know, we were yesterday we watched the movie Hook with the kids. We watched it once before with them when they were really little, but they didn't remember it, so it's like, oh yeah. She remembered seeing it, Jeannie did, but she forgot. She thought she didn't like it, and I'm like, let's just watch it and see. Hilarious. But in that role, Robin Williams, he plays Peter Pan all grown up, but he's forgotten everything about being Peter Pan. And when Captain Hook kidnaps his kids, and they all end up in Neverland, he figures out he needs to ask for help. He's not going to be able to get his kids back on his own. And he's not going to be able to do the things he knows how to do as a corporate lawyer. Corporate lawyers have their place, but fighting pirates just doesn't happen to be one of them. So he's going to need some help getting his memories back and getting ready to fight Hook to get his kids back. And he discovers that that it really does help if you ask for help. It's really in this ability to ask for help that we can see that there's power in being humble. You see, unless you still think that being humble is the same thing as being weak, let's look at a couple of great examples of humble people in the Bible. First of all, let's consider Moses. Moses was a man who grew up in Pharaoh's household. We know that he was something of a fighter because one day when he went out and he saw an Egyptian and a Hebrew arguing, he killed the Egyptian. He ended up having to run away, escape from Pharaoh, live in the wilderness for another 40 years, tending sheep, and just living in the wilderness will toughen a person up. And then he went back and he confronted Pharaoh and led the Israelites out of Egypt and experienced great miracles, did wonders, had some bumps along the way. But through it all, we really see a great leader, and we see a strong person. And this is how he's described in Numbers 12, verse 3. It says, Moses was a very humble man, more so than anyone on the face of the earth. The thing is, Moses wasn't above asking for help either. Moses asked God for help a lot of times, and he asked his brother Aaron for help. And not only that, but he invited his father-in-law Jethro to see how things were going, and Jethro gave Moses some advice. He said, you're the only one kind of trying to run the show here. You're going to wear yourself out. So he gave him some advice, and which was to ask other people, appoint other people to help him out. And so Moses did. Very humble man, asked for help, great man, strong man, accomplished many things. Then there's Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth. In Philippians 2, 5 through 11, which we read earlier, we see that he humbled himself. Here was Jesus who was equal to God, who was in very form God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped or exploited or a thing to be held on to for his own advantage, but rather he emptied himself and humbled himself and became a servant and humbled himself to obedience to death on a cross. And not only that, but Jesus taught his followers to be humble. In John 13, verses 1 through 20, we have the story of how Jesus was having his last meal with his disciples, and he looked around and nobody had taken on the role of washing the feet. And so Jesus did that. The thing is, that was the job for the lowest servant in the household or the lowest person in the group. But nobody else was willing to stoop down and do that. Nobody else was willing to take on that role, so Jesus humbled himself and he did it. And then he told them, that he has set the example, and they should do as he had done. Humble yourselves. Humble yourselves. Be willing to listen. Be willing to ask for help when you need it. And finally, humble people are willing to wait patiently for things to happen. Now, perhaps this is one of the hardest parts of being humble. To me, as I was reading through this chapter, it just seemed to get harder and harder, okay? Humble people listen. Okay, I'm good with listening. I like listening. I like listening and learning from other people. Don't have a problem with it. And if you know something I don't, I'm all about listening to it. Asking for help, if I really need it, I am kind of a do-it-yourself type of guy. I've come up with ways of doing things on my own that I probably shouldn't. I've lived through some things and learned that I probably don't do it again. So asking for help, that's tough. But I'll do that. But now, patiently waiting for things to happen. It depends on how long we're talking. And that's my struggle. If I know how long it's going to be, usually it's better. But if I don't have a clue how long it's going to be, yeah, it's going to get a little more difficult. But really what Ruth shows us is humble people just patiently wait for however long it takes. Verses 14 to 18, we see that Ruth had to wait, allowing Boaz to do his part in all of this. Now, her future's on the line here. This is her livelihood and her mother-in-law's livelihood, and we've already seen she cares a great deal about her mother-in-law, Naomi. She cares a great deal about how she's going to be taken care of. And now she has to wait for somebody else to do their part. And that's really what Naomi told her is, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out. Well, they don't really know how long it's going to be. Well, she's pretty confident. Naomi seems pretty confident. He's not going to rest until this is taken care of. But it's going to take a great deal of patience, because you're going to have to just wait and allow Boaz to do his thing. And like I say, the problem with patience is that there are times we don't know how long we're going to have to wait. You know, in the story of Shrek, the ogre, Princess Fiona is locked away in her tower and has to wait for her prince in shining armor to come rescue her. And in the Broadway version, there's a song that she sings about it, because she's sent away when she's just a young girl. And every day she wakes up thinking, today's the day he's going to show up. And in this Broadway version of the song, you know, she starts off, you know, singing her little song, and it's day 23. Well, then it's a few hundred days later, she's still singing her song, and then gets to day 8,000 something or other, and she's still, but she's tired of the waiting. She's getting kind of short on her patience. See, waiting is difficult. But what I've learned is, if you're impatient while you wait, the waiting is unbearable. Impatience just makes it horrible. You just can't hardly stand it. And sometimes, and like in Ruth's case here, patience is related to trust, and impatience would be a sign of a lack of trust. You see, Ruth had to trust Boaz to actually take care of the matter. And in her case, she couldn't even go with him to make sure he was doing it right. She couldn't go with him and make sure he said all the right things. And she just had to trust he was going to take care of it, and then wait for him to come back. Well, that's tough. She had to trust him. And I see a lot of parallels here between how Ruth had to trust Boaz to take care of a situation that she couldn't, and how we have to trust God to take care of a lot of situations in our life that we can't, that we're incapable of. There are times that we have to wait and allow God to handle things that are beyond our control. And sometimes we really, really, really wish that God would handle them a little quicker. I don't know about you, but there are times when I think God's timetable is just a little bit slower than mine. A little slower than I would like it to be. Is there a boost button somewhere, like on those racing games, or like Mario Kart, or we've got a Crash Bandicoot, a race kart, a game. Get all these boosts. It's like, where's the boost? The speed this up. Let's hit the rockets here. But the thing is, we just have to trust sometimes and allow God to handle it, and we just have to wait. How long? I don't know. Sometimes we're not told. Sometimes we have no idea how long we're going to have to wait for God to move. But we have to trust that He's going to move at the right time and take care of everything in the right way. And so we're called on to be patient. But there's great strength in being patient. There's great strength in this humbly trusting God to take care of things. Isaiah 40:31 tells us, "Yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary." Now, the fascinating thing about that verse is some translations, those who wait for the Lord is translated as those who trust in the Lord. Because the word that's used there, wait, kind of implies a trust and a hope. The NIV translates it, those who put their hope in the Lord will gain new strength. So hope, trust, and patience are related issues in the Bible. And when we trust God and we wait for Him, because the word wait really means kind of to abide, to dwell someplace, to sit still, to tarry, as one old word is. In other words, you just hang out until God moves. It's a hard thing to do, but those who trust Him wait for Him, and those who wait for Him gain new strength. You see, there's a relation between hope, trust, and patience, and humble people tend to have a proper outlook on themselves, others, and God, and so they're willing to wait for things to happen. They take care of the things that are in their control, and I think we should. I think we need to take care of the things that we can, but there's so much we can't. We just need to trust God and be patient. Now, Ruth stands out as a very humble person throughout the entire book of Ruth. We're all called to be humble. We're all called in Philippians 2:5 to follow the example of Christ, to have the same attitude, the same mind that He did, this humble mindset. We're called to conform ourselves to Him, to look to Him as the most humble person who's ever lived. And when we see this humble character of Ruth, it reminds us of the humble character of Jesus, and it reveals to us the power that Jesus has to transform lives and take us from, because I don't know that many of us are really by nature humble people. But He can take us and He can create in us this humble character. And it's humility, not humiliation. Because in humiliation, you degrade someone. And in humiliation, power is often sucked away. But in humility, great power is actually added. And as we see the life of Christ, we see how this plays out, because Christ was able to do the greatest thing in all of history, which is provide salvation for us. And it's because he humbled himself and became obedient to death. He accomplished this great miracle of salvation because he was humble. And Ruth, as we will see in this last chapter, also found that she gained more through being humble than she could have by being prideful and arrogant. So truly Christ has shown us the way to live when he has called us to be humble, called us to follow his example and to do as he has done. We discover that there is great power in living our lives in this world as humble citizens of God's kingdom. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, as we come before you this morning, we want to thank you. Thank you so very much for the humble nature of your Son. And we thank you that in your word we see that humility has always been a characteristic of great people. And that contrary to what our culture oftentimes tries to tell us, true humility brings great power to our lives. And so we thank you. Thank you for revealing this to us. Thank you for giving us the instruction to follow the pattern of your Son and to be humble ourselves. And I pray, Father, that you would help each of us. I pray, Lord, that you would continue to work in each of us to create this humble character. Help us each to be growing in our ability to listen to others, to ask for help when we need it, and to be patient as we wait for you to do the things that you're going to do. We seek to be humble people who can bring honor and glory to you. For it's in Jesus' name I pray.